Good morning. It is 11:32 a.m. and I'd like to call this special General and Finance Committee meeting to order. Verbally confirm that we do have quorum. And also, I'd like to confirm we have our CAO clerk and members of the senior management team here and present. I'd like to continue to advise our public that input on any of our agendas are invited at the following email address, tmlpubliccomment@muskokalakes.ca. At this point, none was received. Reminder that today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the Township of Muskoka website and YouTube channel. By participating in the open public meeting today, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded and posted online. I would like to advise that we did receive a supplementary agenda, was published with a presentation. And also, so let me go back, sorry. Under 4A, we have our invited delegations of Jack Durden, advisor, Glenn Edwards, and Wayne Francisco of GHD Advisory. And as well, there is a presentation from the Director of Operational Services and the Director of Finance regarding the asset level of service study. At this point, I would like to ask committee if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Okay, seeing none, thank you. Just last couple of notes. Motions have been pre-populated with random movers and seconders to expedite the meeting. And once again, that voting members shall physically raise their hand until the chair has confirmed the vote. If the vote is unclear, a verbal vote shall be recorded by the clerk. This is not considered a recorded vote. Okay, so I guess we can move right on into today's focus, and I'd like to welcome Director Colucci to the podium to walk us through items 5A. Welcome.
Thank you and good morning, Chair and Committee. Let's just wait for the presentation to come up. So the report before you is for the asset level service study, and the presentation will just take you through two parts. So the first part would be the actual level of service part, and then Mark will be doing the second part, which will be about the financial. Next slide. So the purpose of today's report would be to review the findings and recommendations of the draft levels of service study prepared by GHD Limited and the financial model prepared by Watson Associates, and forward to council for consideration and its approval. Next slide. The next slide. So we're going to go over the framework. So the framework is divided. We have levels of service, and we have divided each category into a status. So they range from 100% to 0%. And excellent represents something that's fit for future use. It's well maintained and in good condition. Good is adequate for now, which means it's acceptable, generally approaching mid-state of expected level of service. And adequate means it requires attention, there's signs of deterioration, and some elements exhibit deficiencies. And with unsatisfactory, it has an increasing potential to affect service, so which means it could be down at certain times, and approaching the end of the service life and below standard for significant deterioration. And 0 to 10 or unaware innocent is unfit for sustained service, near or past service life, advanced deterioration, assets may be unusable. So what's important to understand is that we're moving toward a age-based level of service analysis. And that's sort of what we have now in our current asset management plan is more age-based. And we've approved this year a lot of condition assessments. So we have building condition assessments, which will look at the assessment of all of our buildings. And then we're doing a road needs study, which looks at all our road network, and an OSIM structure study, which will look at the condition of all of our structures. So, with all that information, we'll be able to move toward a better understanding of what our current asset level is. And next slide. So this chart sort of represents how we're going to achieve our target service. So our current status may be adequate, and our goal is to be good. And what's important to understand, if you go to the next slide, is that we have to look at the measure of each of these categories, because the measure determines what we're actually looking at measuring. So for instance, in the first category here, we have the percentage of hardware with an optimal service life of 5 years. So we're saying 70%, our current level is 70% of our existing hardware is at 5 years. And our target would be 85%. So it's important to look at each of those. And if we look at those, and in some cases, and if we go to the next slide, in this case, if you look at about the middle of the slide, we have the percentage of storm pipes in fair or better condition. So what we're saying is 90% of our pipes are in fair or better condition, and we're proposing to maintain 90% in fair or better. So we're not saying we want all of the pipes in excellent condition. We're saying we want 90% of the pipes in fair or better condition. So that sort of level goes through this entire presentation so that you can understand that we're not proposing that we make everything gold plated. We're sort of maintaining the current and in some cases improving slightly what we currently have. So these are very similar to the numbers presented in the prior report. So there's not a lot of change here. We did make some changes in recreation and in roads, because when we looked at the budgetary implications of the target performance, we felt that we should reduce them slightly. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, so this is arena sports facilities, parks, trails, and playgrounds. So again, we did reduce some of the target performances here because it seemed to affect the budget more than we thought that they would. And specifically the percent of public spaces fully AODA compliant, we had proposed 100%, we reduced that to 40. And the same thing with the climate mitigation. We had proposed 100% there, and we reduced that to 40. And the very last one, the percent of playgrounds in fair or better condition, the current is 50, and we proposed that to 85 instead of excellent. So, so again, we're saying the goal is that 85% of our playgrounds are in fair or better condition. And if we go to the next slide, so this is examples of poor conditions. So obviously we have the fire hall that with the collapsed roof, which is at the end of its useful life, and then we have a hole in a roof structure there. And the next slide would be 11 to 30 or unsatisfactory. So again, we have a step that's falling down. We have a playground that's older that doesn't meet the current level standard. We have a cracked ice surface and some docks that they're on the budget this year to be replaced. And then if we go to the next slide, so adequate. So again, these are in better condition, but still need some work. So we have some washrooms that washroom facility needs a roof replacement. We have the kitchen with the missing stove. That's also in the budget this year to add the stove. Then we have an older playground that's due for replacement, and a community center that needs some refurbishment and needs new flooring. And the next is good. So that's our existing arena that's in good condition. It does need some work, but it's in good condition, and it can just do with some refurbishment and doesn't need replacement. The tables in the arena, so they're actually in or in the community center that are due for replacement this year because they're older. And then we have some playground there as well. And then the next for excellent. So these are things that have been recently refurbished or in very good condition and don't need any work now. So, there's some photos there of a new kitchen, a new playground. Then the next slide. So this is recreational facilities, cemeteries, community centers, docks and wharves. So again, when you go down this list, we did a similar thing here where we reduced the target performance for the AODA compliant and for the climate mitigation plan. So we reduced them to 40. In both cases, the top and the bottom of the chart there. And then, if you look at the middle category, which is the percent of building envelope in fair or better condition, the current is 50%, and we're proposing it to be 85%. So naturally, that's going to have some effect on our operating budget and some effect on our capital budget. So, when we look at that, we're trying to, maintain the current levels of capital budget expenditure, and that's how we came to that level. Next slide. So in library services, so this hasn't changed from the last presentation, but again, the first category is percent of building envelope in fair or better condition, where the current performance is 65, and we're proposing that to be 85 good. And on the second one, we're actually, that's being proposed to be reduced. So the current is 60%, and so 60% of our library collection is under 5 years old, and we're proposing that to be 50. And next slide. So this is vehicles and equipment. So this covers the roads, vehicles, recreation vehicles, and also fire. So when we look at the light duty equipment, where the current level of performance is 50 and the target performance is 85, and basically most of these are already going to be achieved in our current asset plan and our current capital budget for the next 10 years. So it doesn't have a big effect on the future capital expenditures as long as we maintain the current 10-year plan. And then if you look at the second from the bottom, the climate mitigation, so we're saying about 10%, and we reduced that one because we had 100% there as the target performance. We reduced that to 25 because it's a 30-year climate mitigation plan. So in 10 years, we're hoping to achieve 25%. The next slide, this is some examples of very poor. So I think some of these photos were in our budget presentation, but again, we have a lawnmower that's in pieces and not working. We have a lawnmower with a seat that's held together with duct tape, and we have a wood chipper that is no longer operating. And then next, for unsatisfactory, we have a rusted truck and a rusted pickup truck, and these are scheduled for replacement this year as well. And then adequate, we have these are in relatively good condition, but will require replacement soon. We have our sidewalk plow and our snow blower, and also our plate tamper. And then good, so these are equipment that has been replaced fairly recently, so they're in the middle of their life. So we have some fire equipment, a plow, snow plow, tractor, and a pickup truck, and a trailer. And these are excellent. So these are basically items that have been replaced in the last couple of years. So we have the Zamboni, which we just got, and a newer pickup truck, and a new steamer machine, and a landscape trailer for the Parks Department. So next slide. So again, these are our transportation. So that includes our bridges and our roads. So again, we did some adjustments here with the pavement condition index. The proposed level, the current is average of 69, and we brought that the target performance down to 70, which is closer to our current capital plan. And for unpaved roads, the current target is 74, and we brought that to 85. And if you look at the first one is the percent of our bridges with load or dimensional restrictions. So the goal is to have 0% of our bridges with load or dimensional restrictions. And currently in our 10-year capital plan, the bridges that have restrictions now are within that 10-year capital plan. So at the end of it, it will be replaced. So it doesn't have an effect on the overall capital plan. And then our goal for the percent of bridges in good or better condition would be 100% of them will be in good or better, and we're currently at 75. And then If you go closer to the bottom, the last three there, the percent of unpaved roads in fair or better condition, it's currently 95 and our goal is 100. So we want 100% of our roads to be in fair or better condition. So again, that's not all the roads are gold plated, but they will be in a little better condition than they are now. And that's how we propose our capital budget. And then the next slide is just some examples of roads. So the first one is, this is a very poor condition road. So it has lots of potholes. There's actually more pothole repairs than road. And, I'm sure you can pick out some roads in your ward that are like this. And, the goal for that road is, during maintenance, using our operating funds is to keep it in a drivable condition, keep the potholes in control so they're within the minimum standard, so we don't have any potholes that can affect driving ability. And the next slide is again unsatisfactory roads, so that would be like 11 to 30% of the goal. And again, this has a little bit of greater patch on it. It still has some potholes, but it's in a little bit better condition. And the next one is adequate. So again, it's not a perfect road. It has some patches on it, but it's in a lot better condition. It's a narrow road, so it could be made wider if it were being reconstructed. And the next slide is an example of good. So again, you can see the surface of the road is fairly good. There's no holes or patches. It's still a substandard width road. So again, if this were reconstructed, it would be made wider to ensure that there is some, more shoulders. And then the excellent, so this is Bala Falls Road. So again, that was recently repaved. So it's in, very good condition. The curb is there. It's got a paved walkway on the one side and a paved shoulder on the other side. Okay, then the next slide, we're at emergency services. So again, the proposed the target performance is excellent, except for the second from the bottom, which is at 80%. And again, you have to look at each of those, so they're related to each category. So in the middle there, we have personal protective equipment in fair or better condition. So the current is 50%, the proposed is 100%. And that's because within the current capital plan, that PPE is being replaced, and it will be at the end of the 10-year program. They'll all be replaced. And that's similar with the next one, with suppression equipment in fair or better condition, and we're at 90, and the goal is to be 100. So some of that is being replaced in the 10-year capital plan. Next slide, so administrative facility. So that's this building, the medical hub, works yards. So again, so if you look at the works yards, the percent of building envelope in fair or better condition, currently we're at 30, and the proposed is to be at 85. So that's 85% of our buildings will be in fair or better condition. And then the AODA compliance, we also reduced this because our goal was initially in the last report was 100%, and we brought these down to 40. And the same with climate mitigation. So as we do renovations to the buildings, we'll include climate mitigation items in there. And that is that for the first part of the presentation. So I don't know if you want to take questions on that part or let Mark do his part of it.
Sorry, I was waiting for somebody else to speak. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, committee? Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. It's for you to Nick. So great presentation so far. The updated capital project documentation you presented to us, how will that be reflected, or will that be reflected quickly on the existing information that we have, which is, part of our 2025 budget?
So for you,
Sorry,
yeah. So for you, I think that there's several moving pieces here, but the first is we're doing condition assessments on some of our buildings and some of our structures and facilities. The second part is, we have a financial model here that will be presented as part of this project. And then, the third part is that we have an existing, 10-year capital plan. So the idea would be that once this financial model is accepted, and once we have the condition assessments all completed, that, we'll work on updating the 10-year capital plan to reflect both those things. And that'll be part of the budget process that will be coming later this year.
Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest that my question would be to Nick, but I'm not sure. It concerns me, the AOTA discussions. It has concerned me at this council for many, many years, but I sort of just hearing that we're going to go backwards, or what was suggested, now we're back to the 40%. I honestly don't know where this municipality is going in any of those compliances. So we're always just looking at our own buildings, but not the sidewalks, for instance, or other things. And so I don't know where to take the conversation, but I hope we do better, is what I'm saying.
Director Colucci, could you explain the AODA compliance and how do these link?
So through you, for a building to be fully compliant, there's a lot of things that have to be done, like signage and elevators and slopes and walkways. So the idea would be that when a building is reconstructed or does a major renovation, then all parts of that building would be brought up to AODA compliance. But if you look at a lot of our community centers, they're fairly old, and some of them don't meet it. They don't have elevators going down the stairs. They don't have they have steps going up, so they don't have ramps. So the idea would be that when those facilities go through a major renovation, then that's when we would include the AODA upgrades for those buildings. Like, if you look at this building, we have an elevator, and we have a accessible entrance to it. But is the building 100% AODA compliant, right? Like, so that's the problem. We have a lot of, there's disjointed things, like, where the CBO's office is, there's stairs there that, that's not really accessible through AODA compliant ways. So, that would require some changes. But, all of our buildings, they're not 100%, but that's why we reduced, because the idea is, we're not going to be reconstructing all the buildings in the next 10 years. So we can't be 100% compliant.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nishikawa?
Actually, I understand the comment of the buildings and things, but our physical structure, like our parks and all of those types of things, are not accessible as well. And so I guess that's a bigger conversation, but I really do hope to have one day around this table.
Okay, thank you. Just to ask that question, within the parks, if there's a redevelopment happening, is that the moment that it might trigger more AOD compliant?
Right, and for you, so, when we do new park redevelopment, so like, for instance, Jasmine Park, that was completed with the thought of accessibility. So we had, the surface was accessible surface, and there was connection to accessible areas. But, the parking lot is not paved, but a gravel parking lot can still be accessible if it's hard packed, right? So that's it. And, there are other things we look at, but as we do redevelopment of parks, we try to include those AODA requirements.
Okay, thank you. Committee, are there any other questions? Okay, thank you. I think I'd like to just, with the same thinking then, on the climate mitigation, what I'm seeing is an acknowledgement that within the 10-year capital plan, when this 10-year plan, let's set that realistic goal of when things are getting redeveloped, the lens of climate mitigation, the lens of AODA compliant facilities, that's when it gets inputted. But within 10 years, we're not going to be at 100% realistically, because we're not doing everything. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. So like, if we were 100%, then we'd have to have all of our fleet as electric. And right now, for the heavier part of the fleet, there are some solutions for light duty equipment, but for the heavy part of the fleet, like the fire trucks, like the snowplows, there is not adequate solutions to be able to implement them. And, same with buildings, buildings, we don't want to be ripping out HVAC systems that we just installed to install, climate effective HVAC system because, it's new. So when we replace HVAC systems, then we'll look at bringing them in with climate mitigation type plans. So.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Committee? Okay, seeing none, I think Director Donaldson. I think you're joining us at the podium.
Turn the heat up for Mark.
Thank you. Please don't. Let's start with this building condition assessment. Oh, please. Strong mayor powers go flying out the window. Oh dear. Thank you and welcome.
Yeah, great, thank you. So thanks for the opportunity to present the financial forecasted data as it relates to the municipality's asset management and level of service analysis. Today's presentation focuses on projecting the financial implications of maintaining, improving, or adjusting service levels across our infrastructure assets, such as our roads, fire, facilities, and parks. These forecasts help us understand the long-term cost impacts of service decisions and guide strategic investment in a way that balances community expectations, legislative requirements, and fiscal responsibility. It's essential to note that these projections are built on a series of informed assumptions, and these include asset condition data, life cycle replacement timelines, inflationary pressures, funding availability, and service level targets. While we've drawn from the best available information, actual outcomes may differ due to unforeseen factors such as climate-related events, regulatory changes, or shifts in community needs and growth patterns. Acknowledging that these assumptions and their potential variability in future conditions is critical. It ensures we remain adaptable and transparent as we plan for the sustainability and resilience of our municipal assets. So starting point of our forecast are the assumptions themselves, and we started with the 2025 operating budget with the 2026 and 2027 revenue and expense outlooks, as well as the 2025 approved 10-year capital plan. So for this presentation, we're using nominal dollars to reflect future budget requirements. So nominal dollars refer to the actual dollar amounts expected to be spent or received in the future without adjusting for inflation, which means that the figures reflect the future prices based on the assumption that the value of money will change over time with inflation. In simple terms, nominal dollars are what we anticipate paying in the future in future dollars. So if something is expected to be $10 million in 2035, then that's how much we expect it's going to cost. It's not $2025, it's $2035. We've opted for this presentation format just to be consistent with our current budgeting approach, and it's more useful with respect to planning and planning cash flows and getting future budgeting future expenditures. So where new figures have been added to our existing 3-year operating budget, so years 4 through 10, and in the 10-year capital budget, if we've added new capital items in that, we've indexed those based on today's dollars. We've indexed those and reflected them in this plan. For operating, we've used an assumption of 2.33%, which is based on a 20-year history of consumer price index. And we've used 4.5% for capital, which is based on a 20-year history of the non-residential building construction price index. So in this forecast, we have intentionally not included any changes to future grant funding from senior levels of government. So that would be our municipal partnership fund, our community infrastructure funding. We've not assumed any changes in those, nor have we assumed the success of any future grant applications. This conservative approach reflects sound financial planning principles, and while grants are an important source of funding future infrastructure, they're not guaranteed. And so depending on evolving government priorities and competitive application processes and funding availability, we've opted not to include them at this time. By avoiding these assumptions of future grant money, we've ensured that the plan remains reliable, stable, and resilient, and avoids the risk of overcommitting to projects that may not be fully funded. But if grants or changes in those grant numbers do come to fruition, then we would update the plan accordingly at that time. The assumptions in this financial presentation are based on the township's current operating structure and established priorities. So this includes maintaining existing facilities, staffing models, and asset management strategies. Should there be significant changes in operations, strategic direction, or service expectations in the future, those financial impacts would also need to be reassessed and the forecast updated. Maintaining a minimum level of reserves is a key aspect of responsible financial management, and it provides the municipality with flexibility to respond to unforeseen events, cost overruns, or funding shortfalls. So as a part of this approach, a minimum reserve target has been set of 10% of the average 10-year capital spend, and that relates to the capital reserves we're speaking of. So it does not include things like the Affordable Housing Reserve, the CIP Reserve. We've taken those out. We're talking about the ones that are specifically related to capital, the roads, the buildings, etc. Once the township's minimum reserve balance is reached, any additional capital investment would be funded through debt financing. So debt's assumed in this example or in these models to be based on a 15-year repayment term and an assumed interest rate of 4.35% with payments made semi-annually. This ensures that critical infrastructure investments can continue while maintaining and building reserves for the future. We've also included a property growth value assessment assumption of 1.26% in the formula, so we can differentiate between the tax levy impacts and the tax rate impacts in the future. It does not include any impacts relating from a general property reassessment by MPAC, which was last done in 2016. So we're working with assessments as we have right now. We have no confirmation or timing related to that update. And the financial forecast reflects only decisions made by council to date and does not incorporate any assumptions regarding future decisions related to master plans, redevelopment strategies, or other initiatives that are still under consideration. As those plans are developed, then the financial impacts would also be reassessed and the forecast would be updated. Now we can go to the next slide. So the financial forecasting begins with the approved operating and capital budgets as the baseline. And from there, a top-down methodology has been used to estimate the additional investment required to achieve the updated target levels of service for each area. The forecast was developed under two implementation scenarios, which are presented coming up, based on the same total real level of investment that's required to achieve the targeted levels of service. So when I say real, I'm talking in real value. If we invested $10 million in 2026, or if we were taking that over time, then that 10 million would be spread out and indexed accordingly. So the sum of the over time would be more than 10 million. So, but 10 million would be the value of today's investment. The unconstrained resource assumption models, a scenario where the full investment, both financial and effort capacity, is applied within a single year. So that's unconstrained. It all would happen in 2026. Achieving the service level targets immediately. And in contrast, the constrained resource assumption assumes the same investment distributed incrementally over 10 years, aligning with the practical limitations of the budget in terms of financing availability, staffing capacity, and just operational feasibility. This approach provides a clear view with the financial commitment needed, while illustrating the differences in outcomes based on the implementation timelines. And comparing these scenarios provides valuable insight into the gap between the current funding levels and the optimal service delivery, helping to inform prioritization and strategic decision-making. The cost estimates used to determine the required level of service to achieve, the required level of investment to achieve the targeted levels of service are based on the most accurate and available information at the time of this analysis. So next slide. So this chart is based on an unconstrained scenario illustration and shows a substantial rise in capital expenditures in 2026, reaching 37.1 million based on our versus our baseline of 12.7 million. So this significant increase in this significant increase is planned to be financed primarily through a combination of reserve depletion and new debt, with $25.7 million expected to be secured through borrowing. In addition to the capital assets, there is also anticipated increase in operating investment required of nearly $1 million. So this funding strategy highlights the need for considerable investments just to reach our targeted levels of service on a short-term basis. Staff reviewed this and have considered this scenario to be unrealistic due to the significant effort required and the heavy reliance on debt financing, which would significantly reduce future fiscal flexibility. And as a result, do not recommend this approach, emphasizing a need for a more balanced and sustainable funding strategy. Next slide. So this chart is based on a constrained scenario, presents a gradual increase in capital expenditures over the 10-year period, adding $34.2 million over 10 years to the end of the current 10-year planning horizon. So this level of investment is planned to be funded through a combination of reserve contributions and a more moderate use of debt, with $13.3 million in borrowing spread over the decade. This approach reflects a more balanced and manageable fiscal strategy and aims to support the necessary capital improvements while maintaining long-term sustainability and providing flexibility. The current approved 10-year capital plan includes the scheduled replacement for fire stations in Manette in 2027 and Foots Bay in 2031. So in this constrained scenario, the majority of the debt issuance noted by the peaks in 27 and 31 on that line is concentrated in these 2 years to support the funding of these two major capital projects. It's important to note that that these investments are part of the existing plan and not directly related to the proposed levels of service. They represent necessary infrastructure renewals to maintain current service levels. Over the next 10 years, net operating expenses would increase from $11.7 million to $15.7 million, and that's reflected by the bottom part of the shaded stacked bar. This $4 million increase will support inflationary cost pressures, workforce requirements, and identified activities to support the targeted levels of service. And included in this projection are new annual debt service costs that will rise to $1.2 million, which is the very small sliver you see in the stacked bar, and it grows from a line to being an actual area. It grows to $1.2 million by 2035, and that would be to pay the debt that would be issued to support this infrastructure model. As in the unconstrained model, reserve funds, which is shown in the area graph, the pinkish area graph at the bottom, are expected by the end of 2026. And over the following years, reserve fund levels will experience some fluctuation. Upon completion of the Foots Bay Fire Hall in 2031, then reserve levels would begin to stabilize, and then there would be a period of sustained growth after that. And reserve balances would projected to be increased to about $14 million by the end of 2035. And I just want to, for illustration, so these line graphs are stacked. So the bottom line represents the tax levy. The middle line, just above it, that kind of runs parallel. It includes the constant level of grant funding that we receive, and then the the peaks there are where we would supplement with borrowing in those years. So next slide. So just to provide some further context to the tax levy assumptions, the asset management plan approved by council identified an average annual investment need of $18.5 million per year over the next 25 years, based on a total asset replacement value of $620 million. That's in 2023 dollars. So when we index the requirement of $18.5 million, that would mean in 2035, our capital plan, our capital spending would be $30 million. So recognizing the importance of a measured and financially sustainable approach, the recommended strategy is for the township to gradually ramp up our investment levels over time. And under this scenario, the tax levy, as it's shown in the bars, which corresponds to the line graph in the previous one, would support $15 million in today's dollars by 2035, or 24.3 million in 2035. So the tax levy is set that it would support $24.3 million in capital investment by 2035. So taking into account the level of capital investment, along with the projected operating expenditures and the debt servicing costs, the township's estimated tax levy by 2035 would be $37.5 million. That would be the tax levy. And just for comparison, this year, we had a tax levy of 17 point, oh, why do I forget that number? I should know that off the top of my head. It was 17.5 or 6, I believe. Yeah, so that would be looking at the scenario would be an average annual tax levy increase of 7.9% over 10 years. I've included the 2 outlook years we have in our current budget. And then, so we have that around 5.5% and 5% in 27, and then that would ramp up to about 8.6% beyond 2039. So it kind of does a little flat and then does a bit of a hockey stick appearance. So it would be an average of 7.9 over 10 years. And factoring in our growth assessment, the tax rate would average over 10 years, 6.5%. So by 2035, as I've noted, that would result in more than doubling of what the tax levy is today. The significant increase reflects the scale and urgency of the investments required to maintain and improve service levels and address infrastructure renewal and meet our long-term asset management goals. Okay, so next slide. So in recent years, council has adopted budgets that had included a clearly defined contribution from the tax levy to capital reserves. So last year, we earmarked $6 million specifically from the tax levy for reserves. The way this model works, it actually shifts that so that we have a fixed tax rate, and the residual amount in each year that is unspent would then go to the reserves, and that allows for the reserve balances to ramp up in the out years. So net operating expenses in 2035 with annual service costs are projected to reach $17 million by 2035. With a forecasted tax levy increase, with a forecasted tax levy of $37.5 million, that leaves $20.5 million to support capital needs. Based on the numbers that are in this table currently, we would have a $3.3 million surplus in 2035 that would go towards reserve. We have intentionally not spent to the full capital capacity of the tax rate in the outer years so that we can rebuild those reserve balances. So this is not a tax rate that's set on how much we would actually spend. It's based on how much we should be spending. And then we have a plan that basically fills in what we think the needs are based on these levels of service. The reserves include a 2% assumed return on investment, which is very modest, which I think we could outperform. But just to be conservative, we've done 2%. And again, noting that this does not include obligatory reserves and does not include other council reserves related to things that are not specifically related to capital. Next slide. So again, borrowing is necessary when there's a funding shortfall. We have met our minimum amount of reserves, and we don't have enough tax revenue in that particular year. There are some minor shortfalls, and I do want to note the years should be shifted on this chart, one to the left. So 26 should be the first year and 27, 28. Apologize for that confusion. But there are some minor shortfalls in 26 and 29, which I think we could manage. These are relatively small gaps. They're not the focal point of this analysis. More significantly, as we talked about, 2027 and 2031, where we have the fire station redevelopment, that's where we have the majority of the borrowing capacity under this model. And it's something that we would have been looking at anyway, based on our current 10-year plan. The two lines on here, so the lines accompanying the chart are the projected principal and interest payments on the debt. The upper line indicates the maximum allowable debt servicing limit provided by the Municipal Act. The Municipal Act says that any municipality can spend up to 25% of their own source revenue on debt servicing. So as you can see, the line gradually ramps up because revenues are projected to ramp up over time. So that's the maximum that's allowed under the Act. The bottom line that's just above the axis represents what our service payments would be based on this borrowing. So this chart really just illustrates that there's still a lot of debt flexibility remaining even under this plan. So next slide. So as noted earlier, the financial model is built upon a series of informed assumptions, one of which is derived from the township's asset management plan. That plan estimated the backlog of 149.3 million, which was calculated based on asset age, recommended useful life, and like-for-like replacement. While this provides a high-level view of the future infrastructure costs, it's important to recognize that good asset management is not solely about age. It also depends on the actual physical condition of the asset and the timeliness of repairs, renewal, and rehabilitation work. So to gain a more accurate understanding, the township is undergoing our roads needs study, our building condition assessments, which will give us a clearer view in terms of where we're at in terms of our capital assets and their performance. And the actual and in addition to the condition-based consideration, the township has also been impacted by several recent weather events, which also adds significant cost to infrastructure, particularly our roads. And you'll recall from 2004, we had that mild winter over 3-4. Some of our roads were very decimated by that. So these events highlight the vulnerabilities of our current asset base. And as council continues to evaluate the findings of the technical studies and the master plans, any resulting policy or investment decisions from that would require this model to be updated as well. And in the future, council may choose to revisit or adjust service level targets as outlined, which would also require us to revisit this plan. So finally, perhaps the greatest risk to any long-term financial plan is the uncertainty of future events. And for this reason, it's critical the township maintain the maximum amount of flexibility and resiliency to be able to respond effectively to emerging challenges and the environmental challenges, the shifts in legislative conditions, and the ability to maintain and ensure the long-term service delivery and health of the township. Thanks.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions for Director Donaldson? No, I'm seeing hands up, not surprisingly. Mayor Kelly, Councillor Bozemarth, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, and through you. I have a couple, but I'll just stick to two. If I understood correctly, the borrowing capacity, the overall borrowing capacity is not going to be a constraint, but the debt service capacity is. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair. So no, on the debt slide that we looked at, I don't know if we can go back to the slide 8. Well, I have it as slide 8 in the grand scheme, but there was the two lines. The one that slopes up quite high, that's the maximum principal and interest payments that can be handled annually by the township. The bottom line, which was very close to the axis, is where we would be at with this borrowing. So with this level of borrowing, we still have quite a gap in space between the maximum the Municipal Act would allow us to service and what we would actually be servicing from these two, borrowing the bar
Okay.
charts.
Okay. Well, I'll stop with that. Thanks.
Okay. Counselor Bosemarth?
Yes, thank you. And through you, could you go through the the relationship between debt and reserve levels? I don't quite grasp it. So what, I think you talked about sort of a minimum level of reserve, and a constant or a formula for contributing to reserves, and then something that triggered the debt.
Sure.
Okay.
So through you, Chair. So there's a discretionary floor that we've picked of 10% of the average of the 10-year capital spend. So it's around, I think it's around $15 million. So you'd say 1.5 million. 15 is the average, so 1.5 is the floor. So we'd never allow the sum of our capital reserves to go below 1.5. In any given year, once we hit that floor, if there's still expenditures that need to be made according to the capital and operating plan, we would debt finance the delta. So we would just, if we don't have enough revenue from tax revenue, we don't have enough grants, we can't deplete the reserves below our minimum, then we would debt finance whatever the difference is. So that's the first part. I think you're going to come with a follow-up, so
Yes.
we'll
Well,
go with that.
so I understand that, but then you're also saying I also have a fixed increase too, because the other way you could do is you could just jump up the increase 1 year to, make up for part of the debt. So I think you're assuming a fixed increase and a fixed minimum, and anything can't be contained within that, you'll add debt.
Right. So through you, Chair. So on the tax rate piece, what we've said is the asset management plan said in 2023 dollars, we should be spending 18.5 million per year average. What we're suggesting is to jump from where we are now to that amount of investment overnight and sustain that over time is quite drastic. So what we've done is we've said, okay, let's pick a target by 2035. How much should we be able to spend? How much should we build in as terms of capacity within the tax rate to spend on capital? So we've picked a number. It works out to $24.3 million by 2035. So we've said 2035, that's how much in capital we can spend. But that's not directly related to our actual capital plan. We've just kind of set that target in terms of how much we can handle. Then we did a top-down approach of our current 10-year plan. So how much would we add in each year to be able to achieve these targeted levels of service? And towards the end of the plan, we're actually not hitting that full capacity. So we're adding to reserves in the last year. But the whole point of setting the target for the tax rate and doing it kind of that way is really to create a long-term sustainable, predictable tax policy for residents. So it's not, to your point, up, down, year to year over the 10 years. It would be, here's what we think we need to get to. So let's set the tax rate incrementally every year, constant, to be able to get to that point. And we'll manage the pluses and the minuses in the interim as we go forward between prioritization, what projects are we selecting, and debt finance if required.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Ken.
Thank you. First question, I had that same question, but I guess 3 things. I'd love to see a cumulative borrowing schedule, what the total balance is in each year. I can't make that out from this debt financing page, but can you give me an idea what we are today, what we are at the end of 26, and then what we are by the end of 31? Like,
Sure.
yeah.
So through you, Chair. So in this model, the way we have it, we have a couple of years where we have a small shortfall, which may or may not happen. We may be able to manage that. But in broad numbers, it'd be 6 million in 2026 or 2027, excuse me, another 6 million in 2031. And in those 2 small years, 26 and 29, I believe it was, the sum of those would be about $1 million. So it'd be
We're repaying too at the same time, aren't we?
we would be repaying. Yes, that's it. It's added. The debt and service costs are added to the operating budget once those debt proceeds are received.
But we're repaying principal too, aren't we?
Principal and interest, yeah. Debt servicing being principal and interest over 15 years.
So that's why I was saying the cumulative balance, the opening additions.
Oh, I see.
Just
An
repayment.
amortization schedule. Oh, I got you.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's what
yeah.
I was sort of I've just,
I've not done that, but
okay,
mean,
I was just
that
looking to
would be
see how
easy.
much
That
debt
would
we
be
had
easy
by
to
the
do.
time. My first reaction to your constrained versus unconstrained model was, obviously, we can't do unconstrained. I agree with you. But are there areas when you looked at Nick's categorization and the areas that are in the unacceptable area, and are those upfronted to be part of the, although it's a deliberate 10-year plan to get there, are we making sure we attack the really bad areas in the unconstrained model, in the constrained model? Because I was going to suggest that if we aren't, then we probably need to come up with a hybrid model that makes sure we address the critical areas that might be a problem, so we're not at risk. And I don't know whether that is addressed or not.
Okay, Director Donaldson.
So through you, Chair. So there is, I'll say, materially, there's relatively no incremental spending related to the levels of service in 2026 under the constrained model. It really starts in 27 and ramps up from there. So to your question, I think if I was to paraphrase, are we attacking the low-hanging fruit in 26? Not really, not in the constrained model the way it is.
I'm not focused on the year in specifics. I'm just saying with the big picture plan, are we pulling forward the 20% unacceptable ones into at least the early years? Maybe not the ones that are 50% or 60%, but the ones that are really red glaring problems? Or is that just all done at the same pace?
So through you, Chair. So this was done very top down, high level. Allocations of amounts, if I had an extra 500,000 this year, $1 million this year, there was an identification of what projects would be attacked. So that would be done on an annual basis because, between now and 2 years from now, 3 years from now, what we think today might be high priority and we should attack as the first thing might change dramatically by the time that time comes. So we didn't take it to the granular project level assumption. We just kind of
No, I
broad
appreciate that. I'm just
allocations.
wondering, maybe we develop a plan for real use, not just to file with the government, but that says areas I'm really worried about, in addition to the regular stuff, bring some of those forward and come up with a bit of a hybrid between your constrained and your unconstrained to upfront the ones that were at risk. I'm worried about the risk areas. And, whether the fleet is low risk or, at 50% versus 80% may not be a critical area, but there are others that might be really critical, or I'm misjudging that. I don't know how important. Okay.
Thank you. Are there some other questions? I just see.
Yeah.
Okay. No? Okay. Councillor Roberts and then Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Just to clarification, we've got a really good plan or a solid plan, an idea where we're going to go. But annually we will be coming with those projects to us. And those projects are based on the rating of excellent, good, inadequate, poor. So at that time, council will really dive into those ratings. So maybe something we said it could be good, we might decide it could be adequate. Is that correct? Or we need to have it as excellent.
So through you, Chair, and feel free to jump in, Director Colucci, but this very much is a document that is very nimble, right? That the choices that are made could be amended by council at their discretion in terms of the level of service that they think is necessary in order to deliver the services to the community that are required. So, but absolutely every year, just like we do now, we would bring a capital plan forward every year that shows kind of 10 years, and we move things around and we look at what's priority and what we think really needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you to Mark. So Mark, and thanks again for the report. Were we to, as a council, decide to, I don't want to use the word plunge, but to take on a sizable debt to deal with some of the shortfalls, the gaps, if you will, and to take a more fulsome look at this thing, what is the procedure publicly I mean, 6 million, $8 million, we go out to borrow that money for some of these projects. What do we have to go to the public? Is there a public meetings? Is, you know, our master plans, we're going out to the public, we're asking them for input, et cetera. Does the public, is this a public process that we would enter into where we're deliberating on how much money, if that were to be the case, that we would want to debt acquire?
Thank you. Director Donald?
Through you, Chair. To the best of my knowledge, it would be subject to the public's input through the budget process. So when the budget is set, that's where we would identify it. All borrowing that would be done by the lower tier is procured through the upper tier.
Thank you. Councillor Burry.
Thank you, and through you, thank you to Directors Donaldson and Colucci for a very informative report. Leads me to the conclusion that the status quo is not attainable. I don't believe we're going to be able, as a township, to be able to move forward with these kinds of numbers, keeping the levels of service at the status quo, recognizing that we're sending 56 cents on every dollar to the upper tier.
Councillor Burry, would you like me to read the resolution? And then-
Sure,
Because
you
then we can
can.
do questions and
I didn't even know if we were having a
Well,
resolution.
I was going to read it initially and then we got right
mean,
into some good
My
questions.
question is, how do we go at this, recognizing that the status quo, given our status quo, is not attainable?
So let me, I'm going to pause that. I'm going to read the resolution because I think others are probably going to want to comment as well. So, and that doesn't put staff on the hot spot on that question. Moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor Kent. Be it resolved that the draft asset levels of service report attached as Appendix 1 to report OPS-2025-036 be received and forwarded to Council for consideration of approval. And that the public be notified of the report and any comments received be forwarded to Council prior to consideration of approval. So now Councillor Burry has opened up the part of the discussion with your comments.
Well, thank you. So I'm trying to understand how we take all the various pieces and start to put them together. We've got asset plans for fire, for arenas, for, you know, we are clearly going to have to make some very difficult decisions. I don't know if I'm you know, slow off the mark or fast off the mark, but this report tells me the status quo does not work. We just do not have enough money to keep operating our township as we are operating it, given the constraints of a two-tier where we send a massive amount of money to the upper tier. So our ratepayers, because we have high impact values, pay a disproportionate amount to the district. So while we're looking at our little 13 or 17 million dollar levy, you know, us going up 8% or 9% or 14%, whatever it is, our total tax bills for our ratepayers go up even more because of that upper tier. So I'm at the point now, and many know this, that, you know, we've got issues with the upper tier and what services should be provided and what are we paying for them. But if we're just looking at our township in its singularity, which is today's issue, there are clearly some exceedingly difficult decisions that are going to come before us as a council with levels of service and what we can actually afford. Because it is very clear to me with this report that we cannot afford just continuing on with the assets that we have and fixing the assets we have and maybe increasing some here or some there. We just, because of the structure that we only keep 20 or 22 cents of every dollar that gets levied to our ratepayers, it becomes a very, very big number to them for a small proportion of the services that are provided. So I think we as a council are going to have a very difficult time over the next year for this term and the next council in determining what we can do with the money that we have. Borrowing, not a great idea, just as selling municipal assets, not a great idea. But we may have to do that in order to provide some of the services that we've talked about. And I guess my question to the rest of my counselors is, when do we start talking about what's an acceptable level of service for each one of the things that we're charged with doing?
So it's a great question. And I think as staff have noted, and perhaps CAO Pink, you can chime in if I'm off. I think this is the baseline that as we're being presented with today. And if we were to keep the status quo, this is what would be the reality over the next 10 years, which is what you're talking about. But we have embarked on some studies that are coming forward soon. So things like the fire station location, the arena feasibility, the building assessments, condition assessments. Did I get that road? The road needs. And all of that is going to change that long-term capital plan as we make decisions. Is that,
So
I see two hands up. I just want to make sure.
just to be clear, I think this baseline is too high.
Yeah.
I think our baseline, where we currently are, is unsustainable given
That's
the
clear.
current funding models. Thanks.
Yes, no, I heard your point. I just wanted to be sure for in the event anybody is listening, just the idea that as this is the foundation, I see what you're saying. It's kind of clearly laid out for us here. And these other studies and the decisions that we make will then begin to be a trigger of change, I think, in that long-term capital plan. So now I'm looking at Director Donaldson or Director Galucci just to validate that comment.
So through you, Chair. So I just want to be clear in terms of the word status quo. So the numbers that I've presented include incremental spending to achieve the targeted levels of service as well as what we are currently spending. The targeted tax rate is a bridge. It's not the full recommended annual average spending that's in the asset management plan. It's not the full 18.5 million. But it does start to creep us towards that level. And that number was based on existing assets that we had in the township of Muskoka Lakes, that asset management plan. So that did not include any contemplation of changing levels of service. That was just a costing of existing assets based on their age, recommended useful life, and like for like replacement.
Thank you. Okay, hold on for just a second, please. Councillor Burry, did that answer some of your question
No.
or comment, or you're
No.
just still making the statement?
No, it
Okay.
did not. I think that there's going to be lots of other comments. And I think I mean, I threw a hand grenade in there and I recognize that I did that. And that may not be politically appropriate, but I mean, this is a big issue for us as a
Yes.
council.
It's entirely appropriate. We're having this is a significant undertaking, and I think you've identified what we're all trying to grapple with is how do we move forward. So, Councillor Zavitz, and then I feel like I saw somebody else on this side. I think it was Councillor Kent, and then Mayor Kelly. Councillor Zavitz.
Well, thank you. And through you to our good councillor, Mr. Burry. In fact, I can answer his question from 1 of 10. I certainly am wholly supportive of his opinions and his observations. And as 1 of 6 who has been here for now the second round of council, we own this, and I do believe that this is time for some bold moves. And so I fully agree with the scrutiny that we as a group need to do. We need to be bold, I believe, and we have a year and a half left. And I do believe we have the mandate of the people to be the business development group of this council. And we have a lot of hard decisions, and that we need to make them. And I'm certainly here for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kent.
I just want to make sure I understand these terms. Baseline to me means what we're doing today. Okay, that's not what we looked at today. This is required expenditures to get us up to a satisfactory level of service. That, I don't we call that Plan A. And then Plan B would be adding in things like arenas and other major projects that we'd like to do. So there's really, Plan A, which was the plan we just saw, would be telling our taxpayers that we're going to give them an approximate 6.5% That's just our piece. Is that right? That's just not that's without district assumptions. That's just our 6.5 over the next 10 years. Having just had an attack from the ratepayers and other people with our tax rates for the last 2 years, I think we have a real issue having to communicate what this plan means to people and what it means if we don't do this plan. And I think the communication component with the community is probably the most critical component. I think we need to get our terms straight on baseline, plan, whatever you want to call it, and plan whatever you want to call it, because we're not even at base, that plan is not baseline, that's
Nope.
extended.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Mayor Kelly.
Thank you, and through you. A couple of things keying off Councillor Burry's comments. I frankly am glad to see this because we have kicked around the notion that we are carrying too much of little value, even if it isn't going to stand to gain a whole lot of money. We're carrying around too many buildings. We're carrying around too much assets. We fairly gratuitously decide we want to embark on things, better levels of service or whatever. And we got to make this all fit in the picture. And the picture is that we are constrained by, and if we're going to have to deal with this, we're going to have to start thinking in terms of value, pure and simple. And I know I'm a broken record on that. It's never failed me before. Every relationship we have, is it value? Does it add value? Do we see something more than we're giving it? And that's relationships with other levels of government. Are we paying more for the roads that, for instance, are being delivered to us and serviced by the district than we're getting out of it, i.e. can we do it cheaper, faster, better, more often, more efficiently ourselves, or to a higher level of service ourselves? Do we get better turnaround time if we do it ourselves? We got to be much more critical on that. Same thing with all of the assumptions around our operating expenses. I mean, Councillor Kent mentioned 5.6, 6.5. The actual number is 8.6% will increase to cover this. Isn't it?
Hold on. Thank you. Let's just make sure we ask the question of
I
staff.
thought it was 8.6.
Thank you. Director Donaldson?
Without the assessments.
Okay, hold on, please. Director Donaldson?
So through you, Chair. So it's correct. The tax levy increase ramps up to 8.6% in the latter years. And when you factor in growth, then that number actually lowers to 7.2% on the rate.
Okay, thank you.
That's specifically in those latter years. The average over the 10 years of the rate without the assessment growth is the 6.5.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Whatever it is, still too high. We aren't going to be carrying that very far forward. We're heading into, I personally believe, and I'm a bit of an alarmist on this, a really nasty bit of economic time. And this doesn't address issues like our homeless issues and our lack of employment for people issues. But we got to look at everything in terms of value. The relationship with the district needs to prove and show value, or we need to tamper with it. We need to change it. We need to pull stuff back. Even the timing issue. I mean, I understand the urgency, and I realize that on I forget what the first unconstrained version would be, irresponsible for us to pursue that. But even the more restrained version or constrained version needs to be slowed down. Maybe there are things we need to do. We can't operate in a bubble and just pretend that the tax impact on our constituencies has no ceiling on it, because it does, and we're about to find out where it is. Last thing I'm going to say, one of the things we need to do is be bold. We had a test last week. We had a building that made the shame list up here a minute ago. I think if I recognize that building, the Walker's Point abandoned fire hall. We had every chance in the world to dispose of something, and we need to own that. Can't sell that. Isn't that how we resolved it? I think we did. We decided not to dump it. Dispose of it. And but the simple fact is we're going to have to take some difficult choices like that. And communication is going to count a lot. Clear understanding around the table of why we're doing it. But at the end of the day, we're going to have little pushback if what we do shows value. That's really what I'm most concerned about.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Roberts and then Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you.
I echo everything that His Worship has said. 10 years ago, I was working for the Region of Peel. And I remember one of the commissioners, which would be a senior manager, a senior management team, was in speaking. And she said, we can't continue to go back to the public and raise taxes. We got to look for internally at our operations and see how we can tweak and refine it to deliver more with less. So I'm just sharing that. It's been a long time. And just finally, it's no different than if we had in our own home. If we have something, a roof that has to be done, and we want to go on vacation, roof or vacation, well, it's the roof that gets done. So this is where we've got to get down to that level. And someone talked about communication. We really got to get the right communication information out there, because it's going to be, my goodness, you can't take that service away from us. We've had it for decades. But there's got to be some way to really explain. They may not always agree with it, to explain what our path is forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. Just a comment, or it's a question I'm not sure who can answer. I think I've been around here too long. I'm hearing this same thing for many years, and we haven't acted on it. And I actually thought today was going to be part of that. And I don't see that we're going in that direction, but I will also say that council was never given the opportunity to act on it. We heard this over and over, but we never said, okay, this is the day we're going to decide what we want and what we don't want, whatever that looks like. And I'm just, again, when is my question, because it's long overdue for many conversations about our assets are long overdue, not just at budget time to say, yeah, okay, that road, that it's beyond that for me. And again, we're reactive, not proactive. I don't know where that's going.
So perhaps CAO Pink, you could just help us understand the purpose of today is to confirm the condition of the assets as determined through this level of service, knowing that that's nimble, that this is a starting point for the decisions. To Councillor Nishikawa's question, at what point do we start having chances to be making more decisions that have an impact on that long-term capital plan?
Thank you. So through you, I appreciate the comments from committee. They're helpful and they're heard, and I think staff is cognizant of them. And as the chair pointed out, what you have before you is really more centered around the assets that we currently have and the condition or the maintenance condition that we want to keep them in. And the subject matter experts have proposed what are reasonable conditions for the maintenance of those. What you will note on Appendix 2 to the report is the roadmap that we're on. And once the asset management plan is finalized, we will be putting our minds to Councillor Nishikawa's comments, making, and I think a number of Councillor Burry and Her Worship's comments, making some difficult decisions on perhaps more the quantity. So again, the number of arenas, the number of fire stations. The other study that I think was referenced was the public works yards location study that's being completed as we speak. Those are some big decisions because I will be blunt, and I think similar to Councillor Burry's comments, I don't believe we can continue to increase or want the high standards that our assets need to be in, and also to continue to add assets, whether they be playgrounds and other things through delegations, and not want to increase tax rates. I don't think those are really congruent thoughts. Something has to give. We need to make some difficult decisions, whether we look at revenue and sale of assets, sponsorship, naming, other tools, whether that be a MAT tax. We have to start looking at those, but I don't think we can continue to, again, want to increase the assets that we do have, improve the condition that they're in, and not be willing to take on either debt, increase revenue, or increase taxes. I think, and again, those are difficult decisions. The last thing I will note, hopefully councillors or committee members do recall, those difficult decisions were put in motion last month. Mr. Moore and the fire chief were directed to return with decisions on those on the marinas and fire stations, and staff does intend to return in the next month or two with the first steps in those processes and making decisions. So that helps.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Roberts?
This is through you, Chair. This is great that we're coming with the fire plan and we're going to draw, they're going to make a recommendation which way to go. But during what's remaining in our term, are there other difficult decisions that we could set the groundwork for? Such as can we get the arena done? Can we get some of the public works, draw a line in the sand on those, or get it to a point where next council can make the decision on the amount?
Okay.
Is that possible? Do we need a staff report or something that we can do in the next, before the end of the term?
So CAO Pink.
Thank you. I think it might have been going to the same place. Staff can certainly recirculate. I believe it was on last month's agenda at GNF. There was a work plan and work plan. And I think the intention is to make a decision on both of those matters before, certainly before the election next year. I think on a much more quicker timeline than that. I think the fire station location study was by fall or Q4 of this year, and arena shortly after, as it's a bit more involved discussion and process. But staff's happy to recirculate those work plans and the timelines associated with them in that previous report.
Okay, supplemental.
Thank you. But is there another component that we could work on? We know we're pretty well along on those, but should we also pick another one and get it done this term? I don't know which one it would be.
I think Director Colucci would like.
Great, and through you. So as CAO Pink mentioned, we're also working on the Public Works Yard location study. So out of that, could come, a decision on if we still need 3 yards or we need, different locations. So that will be coming, this year back to council. And then also the building condition assessments, we're looking at all of our buildings, including community centers. So, when we, do the assessment for all those community centers, what might come out of that is that some of them are not, they're not attainable to maintain them, in the condition that they're in, because, maybe they have some major structural defects. Hopefully they're all good and we can just do normal maintenance as time goes on. But if through that assessment, it comes out that there is some major flaws, then we might have to come back and say, okay, well, these ones, could be deemed surplus, right? So that's what we would look at. And, staff also are, as part of the building conditions, was looking at wharfs and docks and some of those conditions as well. So when we bring that report forward, we'll have a good assessment of not only the current condition, but also the future capital and operating costs to maintain them.
Okay. Do you have your hand up again? Okay.
Well, yes.
Okay, Councillor Nishikawa.
No, I just didn't, because mostly when I'm thinking about, for instance, Foots Bay Fire Hall, I think about MacTier. I think about what's Georgian Bay doing, for instance, because they're just right there. And so some of those, it's more of a bigger conversation about, are we always checking in to see what the district is doing and if we can piggyback or whatever that looks like. So in the past, when the district was doing the ambulance station for Glen Orchard, not Port Carling, I'm just saying, but there was a conversation about a partnership. There's land there. What could the township be involved with? I don't know that it went anywhere, but I just think it's always important to look for those opportunities to see what other municipalities are doing next to us.
Okay. So just a quick question to staff. I'm assuming you are doing that, but perhaps somebody can comment. I see Chief Murrell had his hand up.
I could quickly comment about the latest paramedic station, the way that was constructed. It was actually a little bit of a surprise to the CAO and myself. That was done in a plan. And they cited that the location was called Glen Orchard, but yet it's very proximate to Port Carling. We then approached them. Yeah, we then approached them about us being included in that conversation, and they had already moved ahead with the project. As for MacTier, we are having conversations with them about their plan, but for the time being, we're just operating our service the way it is. And one of the proposed options was to bring the fire station more away from the outer edges of the township and more inward, which would pull it away from the MacTier location.
Okay.
Just for committee's update.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other questions or comments from committee? So I've read the resolution. Would you like me to read it again or, okay. Moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor Kent. Be it resolved that the draft asset level of service report attached as Appendix 1 to report OPS-2025-036 be received and forwarded to council for consideration of approval, and that the public be notified of the report and any comments received be forwarded to council prior to consideration of approval. No other questions or comments? Okay, then I will call the question. All those in favor? Okay, that carries. Thank you very much. And just before I read our final resolution, I do want to take a moment to thank senior staff, CAO Pink, Director Colucci. Yeah, I've got them up there, our consultants. Director Donaldson, the rest of the team who have been working, I think, quite tirelessly, and our consultants who have joined us. You got off easy today, not many questions directed towards you, but clearly you've been working very hard in the background to help guide us towards something that we needed to do. And, you know, now the ball is in our court to take this and figure out what we need to do as stewards in our community for future councils and future, the future generations. So thank you all. I'm looking directly at you on the screen right now. Those of you who've joined us on screen, thank you very much for your commitment to this project. And certainly to senior leadership team, thank you. I think this has been a heavy lift, and I think we've had a lot of learnings from this, all of us have through this process. So thank you very much for your leadership. Moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by a Councillor Burry. Be it resolved that this meeting adjourn at 12:58 p.m. And the next regular meeting of the General Finance Committee will be held on Wednesday, July 16th, 2025 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair electronically from the Council Chambers Municipal Office in Port Carling, Ontario. All those in favor? Thank you. That carries.